Welcome to Marsha's Plate. This is an interview episode where we talk to friends, family, other community members, and anybody else we want to talk to. Hey brother, hey sister, hey sibling, how are you? Hey brother, hey sister, hey sibling, how are you? Hey, how you been doing? Just checking in today on you.
Hey, what's up, y'all? So I have an amazing show. This is for y'all playing today. This is Pride Month, so I am just thinking about people who I think will be great in having just general conversations about, you know, things that are current, things that are important to us as trans people, and having you hear from people that you might not normally hear it from. And one of those experiences is the Black transmasculine experience. And so I wanted to bring another Black transmasculine voice on the show to talk about, you know, just some shit going on. And so I am bringing Michael David Battle.
Hey, y'all.
So he is a part of the organization Garden of Peace.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about Garden of Peace before we get started in our just chit chat?
Sure. Yeah. So Garden of Peace is going on 9 years old. And we're an arts organization mostly made up of artists and crafters. But we do a fair amount of healing justice and social justice work through our art. We offer artist residencies and fellowships throughout the year. We offer retreats. We do a series of readings and shows and range in age from youth all the way to elders. So we try to celebrate young people. And we're really on a mission right now to celebrate elders and have been for the last couple of years.
Tell me, so social justice is a normal, I don't want to say normal, but is a common terminology that we use. Define healing justice for me.
Yeah. So healing justice work is really rooted in a series and a wide variety of healing modalities, but indigenous modalities. We work with healers all over the country, but we've done healing nights where we bring together folks who do everything from Reiki to tarot to massage to acupuncture to herbology and herbalism, and really talk about holistic living and what it looks like for us to be whole and for us to really use the modalities of our ancestors to continue those traditions, but to really reclaim what healing looks like for us and for our people.
Okay. I wanted you because I didn't want that to just roll past and people not know what that meant while we're having the conversation.
Right.
So we've been having this crazy thing about motherfucking bonnets. And one of the things that I saw when I saw one of your updates on your Facebook status, and I want to read it because, you know, the bonnet hole fiasco is an attack on Black women. And so for me, of course, right?
I'll say.
So for me to see a Black masculine guy chime in so brilliantly, I wanted to kind of share your quote and share your status about it. And I want to kind of discuss it. Okay. So you said, Black folks, there is no level of respectability that will stop anti-Blackness. Not a wig, not a relaxer, not a straightening comb, not braids or locks or either. Not a suit or a tie, not a clean cut, not an education, not even a large bank account. There will always be something too Black about you. Folks will still spray paint nigger on your home, and Netflix will still cancel your special or underpay you for a special. Anti-Blackness depends on Black folks disposing of each other for a myriad of reasons. We owe it to ourselves and each other to challenge the things that we've been taught to do to erase Blackness in a greater effort to make ourselves more palatable for white folks, comfort and tolerance. We are magic, and every day we have to wake up. Every day that we wake up is an act of resistance and love. Hashtag bonnets. That is totally what I felt. I felt like, yo, this shit is, you're trying to cover it with this auntie, I love y'all for real. And I just care about how our image and, you know, the pride, and that you're trying to do it in this, you're trying to sell us this anti-Blackness in a tender auntie, older woman way. But we know that older women, particularly people who invest in respectability politics, that can be dangerous for us. That can leave a lot of people behind. That can leave people who don't fit a certain class. That can leave out people who don't fit a certain socioeconomic status. That respectability that she's invested in throws a lot of people away. And it illegitimizes what we say when we talk about how it doesn't matter how we look. Motherfuckers, if they're fucking racist or if they're anti-Black, they're gonna do whatever they're gonna do. It don't matter if we got a bonnet, we got a straight wrap that's flowing and quote unquote clean and got full of body like we on a fucking Pantene commercial. If they want to be anti-Black and they want to be fucking racist, they're gonna do that.
My wife is way more into social media than I am. I kind of avoid social media, to be honest. But she kind of updates me, you know, she tells me what's going on. So when the bonnet conversation came up, I think she started talking to me about it maybe last week or the week before. And she made a few posts, and, you know, she was bothered. She was like really bothered by it. And we were talking about it, and I just said, you know what, like, I think what's really bothering you is that it's another attempt at erasing Blackness and assigning and ascribing certain characteristics to certain things. And the reality is that we have this conversation saying Black Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter, right? And at the same time, then you're still trying to put a caste system in place or a system of hierarchy in place. And the reality is that it really doesn't matter, you know, what you're wearing. You know, I even brought up, I consistently hear older Black people, and I'm around a lot of older Black folks, and I have a lot of respect for elders, a ton of respect for elders. And it took me a while to get on board with the baby boomers, but I started to understand that, you know, talking to my parents in particular, my stepfather and my mother, started to understand some of the indoctrinating that they went through, especially as young people, and really just started to think about the desegregation of schools and what that looked like and the breakdown for them. You know, my mom was 11 when schools got desegregated. My stepfather was a senior in high school. He was 17 years old. And they went from being in all Black schools with all Black teachers and all Black administrators and all Black PTA to now suddenly being like washed with white folks. And there also being an intentional movement for white women, white girls to be trained as educators and to then be in the classroom, but to really to indoctrinate young Black people with the idea that if they acted more white, if they changed their language, if they performed whiteness in a certain way, if they dressed better, if they straightened their hair, that they would be treated better. But we see that 60 years later, that's not the case. And so, you know, and I brought up, you know, the talented 10th. I said, you know, we tried this already. You know, you had W.E.B. Du Bois talking about the talented 10th and how these 10% of people were different than the other 90% of people, right? And it's just not true. The reality is that Blackness is the anti-Blackness is the problem, right? Anti-Blackness is going to exist whether you have on pajamas or whether you have on a suit and tie, whether you have locks or whether you have a clean cut. You know, you can look at the hundreds of Black people who are killed by police officers every year, and you can see that they all look different, but the result is the same.
I'm so glad that you brought up W.E.B. Du Bois, because if you look at his career of in academia and in his writing, he actually did a shift. And one of the people who really a shift to a more not respectable politic around education and academia. A book that I love that kind of depict this is by Ibram X. Kendi, Stamped, where he followed W.E.B. Du Bois and his transition, because when he was younger, in the beginning of his life, there was like they did with a Phyllis Whitley, there was this exotification of intellect with Black people. It was like, oh my God, this is special. This is this thing. Like, oh my God, they can write poetry. Yeah, bitch, if you made it legal for us to read and made it legal for us to fucking do shit, we would be able to do it. So it's not this fucking amazing thing that we couldn't be able to do it. You motherfuckers was killing us for doing this fucking shit. And so there was this idea that because the power structure was so different and the accessibility to things was so different, and who had the power to stop us from getting care, stop us from getting food, stop us from having safe places to live, was so rooted in it was so hectic that following these respectability rules were a life or death situation. So there was a time when, yes, respectable, dressing a certain way, looking a certain way. That's why when Frederick Douglass did that photography, that image consulting kind of thing, where he made, he took pictures of Black people dressed up in the fancy clothes, because that in that moment, that actually did something that pushed the culture in a different direction. But we are not in that time in 2021. We are not in a time where we are proving ourselves to white people. We are not in our times where we are proving ourselves to the upper class, not just white people, because it's fucking Black people who are in the upper class that does the same thing. And so we are past the time, and like I said, W.E.B. Du Bois shifted in his mindset around this in his own life, but definitely right now in 2021, we are past a time where we believe that a Black person's value is rooted in how well they can code switch, how well they can not sag their pants, how not Black they can be perceived. That is just not true, and we're not doing that anymore. And I think the bonnet conversation is rooted in that, and older people like Monique are not, are never probably not going to change. So tell me, what are some of the things from a Black transmasculine perspective? What are some of the things? Now, the bonnet is for women. I know sagging is something that that's kind of out of style, really, even not just on a cultural level, but sagging was one like in the 90s. What are some of the things now that you see in the Black masculine expression that has a lot of backlash, or a lot of people talking about whether it's respectable or not respectable?
I think that gender expression is something that we see amongst trans people, where it's not, are you trans enough, right? And once it's interesting, because in Black trans spaces, Black transmasculine spaces, what I have found is that there's a lot of people who don't feel trans enough, really it's misogyny. That's really what it is. I mean, it's just misogyny.
Explain that a little more.
What I have found in my experience, I've been in trans spaces now for about 13 years. What I have found is, especially with other Black trans men and transmasculine folks, when we're having conversation, I'll point to something more recent that happened in the last few months. I was having a conversation with 3 other Black trans men, and we were talking, and it was actually the day before someone's surgery, and their top surgery, and we were, celebrating that. And the conversation came up about folks who identify as genderqueer and gender nonconforming. And, I wasn't really chiming in on the conversation. I was listening at that point, but I heard somebody say, well, I'm not going to call you he if you're not on testosterone. And I thought to myself, wait, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, you weren't always on testosterone, were you?
The week before you took your first shot, you wasn't a he yet.
That's right. I'm like, so, is that where we're at? This is the conversation that we're having right now. Is like Black transmasculine folks in this space. Like, now we're like literally we're arguing now. Me and him are arguing and going back and forth. And I said, he said, well, people didn't do that for me. People didn't respect. And I said, so that's called internalized transphobia. And so now you're internalizing transphobia and misogyny. And even in the last week, I had a post that had a picture that got a lot of likes, got a lot of shares. My family and I dressed up for Black Fae Day, and another Black trans man said that, he's not looking to recruit the type of people who, like me, the type of guys he's looking for would never dress up for Black Fae Day. They would never do that. And I said, well, me and my son were actually, then our photos were taken and put into a collage as the top 10 Black men for Black Fae Day on Instagram. So it wasn't that there was nothing feminine about what we did. And even if it is, even if we were performing femininity in some ways, or, it doesn't make me less of a man. I don't, there's a lot of insecurities that I think men in general have. And that's across the spectrum. That's cis, trans, men have these insecurities because of misogyny. And it is up to men to make the decisions to just not care about what anybody else has to say about your manhood. That's what I see. I see that there is just this competition of how hyper masculine can I be? How alpha male can I be? And for me, I grew up with a very strict grandfather, and he said that a man protects and provides. That's it. There was no other qualifications for that. And I protect my family. I provide for my family. That's man enough for me.
I heard a conversation. I was listening in preparing for our conversation. I was listening to a discussion that was kind of sharing the nuances of what you just said as far as not being trans enough. And then on the flip side, while that is the more toxic one, there is a flip side that there's a conversation that says that we are too binary. Like you're not trans enough, like you're not performing your gender in this perfect masculine way, but also there's this, you're not queer enough, like you're and these are not going to be the same type of people. Usually it's like a non-binary person was like, oh, you're living up to those male standards. And there's also people who like, but I like this. I may not be as strict and silly and arbitrary as somebody who's saying you're not a woman if you're not on estrogen, or you're not a woman if you don't have breasts yet. All these things, because those are arbitrary things that are silly. But I like where I am. I like being binary. I like being this person. And then there's sometimes people who would be like, we're supposed to be dismantling the binary and you're not doing it enough.
Yes.
Now, of course, binary people are going to be the privileged one on that. So I'm not discussing in the sense of, woe is me, I'm a binary trans person. But what I'm saying is that both of these situations are actually, for me, too extreme. Like if you are trying to police how trans somebody is, or how binary somebody is, or non-binary somebody is, I think both of those things are a problem. I think the point of us, my point, I want to say everybody's point. I see the point of us doing us and coming out of those boxes is that we are being an example to allow other people to say, hey, if I want to be and I want to present this particular way, then that is what it is. And I can do this in however makes me feel comfortable, whatever makes me feel affirmed, that is not impeding on somebody else's identity, impeding on somebody else's agency. I think it's okay for me to be this. And I think that's where we all should be, striving for.
We owe it to ourselves to investigate, to dissect, to break down the things that we have been told, especially as trans people, the things that we've been told to hate about ourselves. I remember when I started transitioning physically, and I had a lot of guy friends. I played softball my whole life, and I was playing travel softball on a men's team. And one of my teammates, wasn't coming from a malicious place. He was coming from a place of safety and concern. He was like, I noticed on your Facebook page, you still got a lot of things like the music artists you listen to. It's like a lot of women on there, and I just, I'm concerned about some of the ways that you present and express yourself. I don't want you to like get hurt, and I remember him even just saying things like, maybe you shouldn't say you play softball. Maybe you should say baseball. Right? Like, because I just don't want people to ask questions. And so I remember for a little bit, I tried to do that. I was so consciously aware that, man, if I say softball, somebody might question what my gender is. And so I'm going to say baseball. And I recognized that for me, it just didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel authentic to me. It didn't feel genuine. And I couldn't really be myself. I even said to you, I said, when I get nervous, I get a little uptight. I get dry, I'm not making jokes because and I default to that. I default back to, I have to perform in this way. And I've gotten so comfortable with myself. And I think that when I'm in Black, trans, and masculine spaces, that's what the other guys say to me too. They're like, I would never question your gender, even though you do things, you present a certain way, you might cross your legs a certain way, I might start doing yoga in the middle of something, but it doesn't bother me that I'm doing something that's feminine, because I know who I am. I'm very comfortable with who I am. And I think that we all have to get to that place. It's not about how much tea I'm on, how long I've been transitioning, whether my birth certificate has changed. My birth certificate just got changed last year. Just got changed. It doesn't make a difference to me. I think we owe it to ourselves. We really do, to break those things down, to break down being more palatable for anybody. When it's safety, that makes sense. But if we're not talking about safety, you're talking about loving relationships. You're talking about your friends. You're talking about your family. I can't have my life set up that way. That's too stressful.
There is no way I'm going to be in no damn airport and see a group of Black women and even worrying about what they got on their head and looking at them in any kind of judgment kind of way. I'm going to feel safety in seeing them there because I know I'm at this motherfucking airport where these motherfuckers could be. I'm trans, so I might be worried about, is this scanner going to pick up what it was? I might be worried about that. But and how they go frisk me down and do all that kind of stuff. So that might be what's taking my mind. But I'm definitely not looking at I'm not going to be in the airport looking at bonnets and choosing to turn my nose up or and look at them and say, oh, they're making the whole Black community look bad. That is not what kind of politics do you got where there's too many fucking Karens running around the airport for me to look at and judge than me look at the group of Black girls with the bonnets. I'm sorry. Yes. That's just not what I'm going to be doing. So early in transition, because this question goes along with this conversation, it flows right into it. I found having an authentic conversation kind of to myself or to other people difficult about the duality and femininity, the duality of femininity and masculinity within myself, because I was so busy trying to get people to see who I was as a woman. There was, as I get older, I was always trying to prove I'm a woman, and I didn't want to do things that, even if it was like shit that I like video games or things that in my mind I associated with masculinity. Working out, even though that's healthy for you, anything that I deemed as masculine, I didn't want to do that because I was so invested in, I want to give you whatever it is that womanhood was to me. And so there was this reckoning that happened as I got older, and I had less fucks to give, where I explored things that I pushed away to prove my womanhood, and then explored things that I is hyperbolized a word? I know hyperbole is, but think about
We're
hyperbole.
going to accept it.
We're going to accept it. Fuck the English language. So,
Right.
and examine and explore things that I hyperbolized, the things that I made very extra because I was trying to prove my womanhood. So, can you talk about your relationship with masculinity and femininity and how you navigated that throughout transition, even pre-transition? Like, how did you navigate balancing femininity and masculinity and coming to grips with this politic that you have now? What was some of the pitfalls? Explain that to me from your perspective.
I hyper masculinized. I thought that was the way to do it. As I came out, let me go back a little bit. I came out in high school as bisexual to my mom. And I thought that was going to be easier. Like, to me, it was like, well, if I say bisexual, it's like a halfway. You know what I mean? Like, my 15-year-old mind, that made sense. Like, she could halfway accept that, but my mom was having no parts.
It's like me when I was lying to the boys saying I was a hermaphrodite.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we go through things, okay? Like, we go through things, and and I went to college when I was 17. I met somebody who was a trans man for the first time, and to be honest, I was just not there. I came from a very Christian family. My mom grew up in the South. My grandfather is a founding reverend for the Church of Christ Holiness USA. My mom didn't wear pants until she was 25. Like, she cut her hair when she was 28, and that was still a problem. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I grew up with these very strict ideas of what it was to be a man and to be a woman. We didn't even really talk about gender. It was like man, woman, boy, girl. This is what you do. And my grandmother identified me as a tomboy when I was real small. And that was acceptable until I was about 16. And I remember I was a senior in high school. I was 16 years old, and my mom had a conversation with me about my gender presentation. And she said, you can be whatever you want to be, but you still a woman. And so, the collared shirts and the baggy pants and all and she got rid of my clothes. And
wow.
She bought me all this feminine stuff, floral shirts and pink and purple. And I was mortified. Like, I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to go nowhere. I tried to wear my softball uniform every day, like, it was terrible. So I went to college. I was like, okay, I'm free. And I went to an all women's college. It had its own issues with racism. We don't even gotta get into that. But as far as gender, because I was meeting so many people who were expressing differently, it gave me a lot of permission. And so I cut my hair. That was the first thing I did. I cut my hair off, buzzed my hair off, showed up to soccer practice like, hey, y'all. And they were like, oh, shit. But I started to really I wanted it to be very clear that I was at least visibly queer. And so I was always in oversized clothes, started wearing men's clothes. I didn't come out as trans until I was a senior in college. And at that time, I thought, well, I could just be genderqueer. I could just be, in between. And I don't have to have surgery. I don't have to do hormones. I don't have to change my name even. But that didn't last very long because I had already acknowledged to myself who I was. And I knew, even as a child, I remember like staring in the mirror and looking at myself. And I would look at myself so long, like just try to see myself as a man, what would I look like with no hair? What would I look like with, the jawline? And I started, like, as soon as I said I was trans to my therapist, it was raps. Like, I had to go through it. But my solution for a long time was just to be as masculine as possible. I wore suits and ties all the time. I don't know if you remember when you met me down in North Carolina, suit and tie every day.
I didn't know that was your aesthetic. I thought that was just because we were at Bishop Raw's event, and
Yeah.
that's what it was going on. That was a
Yes,
churchy ass event, and that's
true.
what it was.
That's true too. I was in suit and tie every day. Summertime didn't matter. I was sweating bullets. But to me, everything else, I would feel like, oh, people are looking at me, or is this cut right, or is it fit on me right? Even after T, but it wasn't top surgery and T testosterone. That's not what made me feel like a man. What really made me feel like a man was when I stopped caring. It was literally the first day that I said, I do not want to wear this suit right now. Like, it's hot. I don't want to wear this. And I forced myself to wear something else. And I started to just slowly get back into myself. I grew my hair back out. I have the same hairstyle that I had when I was in my early 20s. And I cut my hair when I transitioned because I thought, well, I want to have long hair. I don't want to, I didn't want people to be confused. But I started having real conversations with people too. I just told you I tried to switch the type of sports that I played in the past, and because it didn't feel authentic. I started having conversations with people about feeling inauthentic. Like, I started talking to my friends about, like, I know I'm doing this because I don't want people to question, but it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right for me to say, I was a boy. I wasn't a boy. I was a girl. I was raised a girl. Like, I played girls softball. I was in the girls' locker room. I had teammates that cried on the bus with me because they didn't want to sit next to me after I came out. And to not say that, to not be authentic about that, it just erased my whole life. I can't do that. I can't act like I didn't exist. And I didn't want to keep making stuff up. I didn't want to be switching my voice and making my voice sound more baritone than it really is. Like, my voice is what it is. I'm from Pittsburgh. It's only 8% black. So I'm only going to sound, I'm only going to sound the way I sound. But that's, I think that's just about being authentic and being genuine and having real relationships, like having people who really want to see the real you. They don't want no fake version of you. They don't want you to lie about who you've been. And, I'm grateful for those people in my life.
Prior to you really just acknowledging your transness, you talked about being visibly queer and how that meant something in that space, in that moment. And I remember a time when, I wanted you to know that I was proud, because this is pride, that I was proud to be a queer, whatever I was, a queer something. This is even before the first hormone, before any of that. I wanted you to know what was going on with me. Now, where we are now, I see your visual, you see my visual. Sometimes when we're navigating the world, because we are navigating the world in such a kind of binary way, that visibly queerness is not as visible to people. And particularly you, when it can be particularly dangerous in certain situations when people are perceiving you as a stereotypical black man. And so how do you navigate that? What do you think about that? How are you experiencing losing that kind of visibly queer, that queer visibility, and how you're expressing yourself now? Why was it important then and not important now?
It was really important to me then because I didn't know myself. And I was trying to put on rainbow flags and wear the baggy clothes and wear men's clothes and make sure I have a close cut because I wanted people to know I'm different. I don't look at me and think that I'm just, everybody else. Now, I think I still express myself, like my friends will joke because I wear joggers and some of my friends say I look like a soccer mom, like I'll wear joggers and the shirt with the Columbia vest and, like I'm very comfortable. Like now I'll throw on one of my wife's pair of leggings, like I'm that comfortable, so but I think now me being, for me, I think the most visible part of me is my blackness now. Back then, I think in a way I was even going to an all-white school, pretty much, going to an all-women's college. I was in a white neighborhood. It was actually dangerous for me to be as like boisterous about being black. And it made it safer for me to be queer because it was a very queer area. And I think that had a little bit to do with it, but also I was a teenager.
Wait. Don't, you gotta be quiet. You gotta say that real low because the hoteps, if you let the hoteps hear you say that it was safer for you to be queer, then we can, that's gonna legitimize their foolishness. You can't say that real loud, even though I understand what you're saying. Because when I was younger and the cops would stop me, I would make sure they knew that I was queer because it just made them a little bit less aggressive as a queer man than a regular black man. And Absolutely. So I know that that is a reality, but we can't let the hoteps hear you say that. We got to keep that on the low.
It's true, right? When I was in college, I lived only a couple blocks away from like the gay district, right? It's the strip on Ellsworth Avenue. And so I used to go down there, and being black and straight down there it was not as safe as me being a black queer person. Everybody knew me. I knew the bar owners, I knew everybody who was around that area. Now it's actually interesting because of my presentation. When I go into those type of spaces, people do not look at me the same at all. And I am seen as a threat. I had to like really understand that. It took me a minute, but I lived in another white neighborhood when I moved back to Pittsburgh in 2012, and I was working across town, so I used to catch the bus, and sometimes I would bike, sometimes I would take the train, and I remember getting off the train one night, walking down the street, and there was a white woman walking toward me. It wasn't that late. It was like 8:30, 9 o'clock. And when she saw me, she like literally froze and crossed the street. And so I started looking around thinking like, oh, something must be coming, and I'm thinking there must be something coming toward us that I need to watch out for too. But I could see, like, I looked around and I said, oh, she's running from me, like, oh my, and I was so taken aback. But it's interesting because people tell me on a regular basis, I'm only 5'7.5". My kids say 5'8" on a good day. I'm not that tall, but people still will describe me as a big black man. And, and some people have told me that, like, they'll say, oh yeah, I was telling them to look for the big black man. And I look around like, big? Who's big? Like, but it is the blackness people do. They just is a synonym with scary, with big, with, threatening, with violent, and I'm not comfortable with it. I am accustomed to it because I understand it now. I've been transitioning. I started transitioning physically in 2011, so it's been 10 years. So I'm accustomed to it, but it was a real struggle for a minute, like, because I'm just not like that. I meditate for probably 50% of my day. I'm in a very different headspace. So a lot of times when I'm driving, I'm listening to meditation music, I'm zoning. So when I get confronted with that type of energy, like the way the cops interact with me now is crazy. It's crazy. Like, my wife had a situation where she got accosted by somebody threatened to kill her. I wasn't even there. I showed up 15 minutes later to check on her with the cops there. And the cop told me to get away because I was threatening him. And I was like, I didn't even say nothing. Like, I'm just standing here, just trying to like make sure that she feels comfortable, because I know that, her interacting with the cops is not a comfortable situation. But when cops interact with me, it's off the top aggressive. There's never a like, how can I help you? What can I do? It's like, what did you do? Or telling me what I did. And I'm like, hold up. I didn't do nothing.
Let me back up a little bit. So we just were joking about, the perspective of being being a black masculine person, being black, being less, and being queer being less dangerous. we said it jovially, but we're explaining situations where this can that this can be true. But we also know that in different circumstances, it can be more dangerous for you to be queer. And so I want anybody who is listening not to take our us being lighthearted about it as we're saying that Black men are more are less privileged or anything like that. We know in certain circumstances Black men are seen as a threat and a danger. Absolutely, particularly when we're engaging with police. So yes, we know that. And so, but understand that just because you are a man, understand that there's another kind of oppression that happens when we engage with police, because that queerness, and it's particularly if you are female bodied or a femme, although you are more at danger of being murdered, we are more at danger at being accosted and sexually assaulted and objectified in that kind of way, and groped and touched and sexualized when we are engaged with police. So it's just different. It's not that it's more or less, or this some type of oppression Olympics. It's just different. And what we want you to understand sometimes is that when you are selling this idea that you are more oppressed, you're actually illegitimizing our struggle and our narrative. One of the things that I have learned in watching cops and how they engage, particularly with masculine Black people, not just masculine, I want to say all of us. When it comes to Black people, it is about controlling us. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Get out the car. Why the fuck are you looking at me like that? Don't buck up on me like that. And it's a anger. It's a control. It's a disgusting display of authority. But when they are engaging with white people, it's about the law. You ran that light. You're not supposed to run that light, and you ain't got no tail light here, sir. Like, why? I'm just gonna have to give you a ticket. And you made a left turn over there, and you weren't supposed to make a left turn. The law is you can't make the left turn. It's about enforcing the law and not enforcing their motherfucking control and their power over us. Right. When it comes to Black people, it's about enforcing the control. So I want to make sure that is a very, very distinct difference. And so it doesn't matter. Anytime we deviate, it don't matter if we have our bonnets, it don't matter if we have our do-rags, it don't matter if we sagging, it don't matter what. If anytime we deviate or don't perform that submission in a perfect way, don't perform that however we're supposed to engage in a perfect way, it can end up with us losing our lives. And so I wanted to clear that up.
Yes.
I want to switch gears a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
This is a quote that I saw on Twitter, and I wanted to kind of explore it from a transmasculine perspective. Going in on Black transmasculinity in the way that y'all do is just another form of misogynoir. Y'all hide it behind they upholding toxic masculinity, but it's really because y'all still are seeing us as Black women, and y'all just want to wear us out because you are misogynoirists. I've seen this conversation multiple times come from transmasculine people, and I want to know your opinion. I see it show up in conversation, and I recognize it, and I'm not 100% for sure because I'm not a transmasculine person, but as a person who has empathy and look at nuances of oppression, and as Patricia Hill Collins would say, the matrix of domination, I see it show up in conversation. I hear from women, cis or trans, who date Black trans men. It's like this real turf-like sensibility around their beliefs in what y'all do and how y'all act. How they are. In the they'll say like, oh, you know how they are. In the subtext, even though they don't say it, is because he used to be a Black woman. Mm-hmm. And I hear it. They won't say that because they know that's politically incorrect, particularly people who date y'all. Mm-hmm. And so, can you, if you agree with this, can you tell me if you do or if you don't agree? tell me if you do or if you don't agree with it. How does misogynoir show up against you as a masculine, assigned female at birth person? And how would that surprise people who may be, familiar with misogynoir in a certain way? How does it show up for you? And how have you seen it, if that's true?
I guess I'll give two examples. One, about 6 years ago, my wife and I led a counter pride movement in Pittsburgh called Roots Pride to shut down the Pittsburgh Pride and to ensure that Iggy Azalea wasn't going to be the headliner at Pride that year. So we did that. It was very successful. The community rallied with us. But one of the things that happened while that was going on was Pittsburgh Black Pride, which has been around. It's the oldest standing, and this is still true to this day, the longest standing pride movement in Pittsburgh. But prior to 2015, and even still to some respects, they had no events for trans people. I'll give you an example. They had a pageant, and there was a Mr. and a Miss. And trans men, trans women, no trans people were allowed to be a part of that event at all. You could buy tickets and go to the event, but you could not participate as a contestant. And there were two contestants who won prior to their transition. When they transitioned and they went to the director and said, hey, this is my name now, this is my pronoun now, they continued to misgender them, continue to use their birth name. So that was something that had came up multiple times, and I addressed the director like, hey, what's going on? Because these two individuals have now contacted me, and I have supported your organization and supported your group for a long time. Why? Like, what, but as I delve deeper into the event, now you're having a basketball tournament that only cis women can participate in. You're having a cookout that is the only event that you have that anybody can come to, but it is primarily cis women. And so, when we did Roots Pride, we reached out to them and we said, hey, we're going to be doing this, but we would love for you all to participate and really, collaborate with us. They did not want to do that. They actually then went to the media and slandered me in the media. The director said, and I quote, that I behaved like a woman who was PMSing. Right? So this is the director. Right. And you have never hosted anything for trans people. You're mad because we have finally created something that's inclusive of all of us. And instead of celebrating that, you come and are transphobic to me to the newspaper, something that is in print and will be in print forever. Right. And other people, nobody addressed it. The Courier, the Pittsburgh Courier newspaper printed it like it was fine. They didn't even come to me for a comment, didn't ask me anything. I had to get sent that article online because somebody was like, what the, like, but not only did the director say it, now you have the newspaper who is culpable as well because they didn't even come to me. You had no respect for me as a person to even come and get a comment from me, to even get a response, to let me know that there was going to be something like this printed. So that's one instance. And, when we had conversation about it in community, there were a lot of people who thought that it was just fine. They felt like, I could have responded if I wanted to, but they didn't see the issue with it at all. Hence, I left Pittsburgh 3 years ago. Then another instance that I'll give is a lot of trans men are caretakers and their family, and people don't realize that. Like, I know I'm a caretaker in my family. I'm a co-power of attorney for an elder in my family. And a lot of us, because we are raised as girls, right? There is, we know the invisibility of labor for Black women and girls. We know what that looks like. The erasure of labor, the erasure of emotional energy. And so that doesn't really change when you transition, and at least not in my family. That's just my experience. I still do a bulk of emotional labor in my family, and a lot of it is erased. A lot of it is not recognized. And when I talk to other Black trans men, a lot of them are caretaking for elders, especially in their family. And there is not really, not a recognition of like, this is emotional trauma, that you've experienced things, even the way that people engage with you around your emotionality, or around you having just like normal feelings. It's like, I want you to perform and act like a man, right? But at the same time, I am going to still engage with you the way that I would have engaged with you as a Black woman.
How do you balance combating those people who might be attacking you from a position of their misogynoir or their transmisogyny, and hold toxic trans men accountable when they are investing in patriarchy and misogynoir? How do you balance that?
It's vital. So I just told you we went on the trip yesterday to go see Charlie, and that it was a huge topic of conversation because we actually had an incident here a few months ago, where we were at an event. It was a birthday party, and there was a trans man who I had never met. And most of the people in the room did not know him. But he was a friend of the host. So he was being very violent to a trans woman who was in the space. And I had just walked in and I'm like, what is going on? And other people were sitting there and they were kind of like stuck, just like, what the hell are we supposed to do right now? And what we wound up talking about yesterday was one of the guys that was there. He said, I felt like it was like a bystander effect. Like, honestly, I didn't know how to respond. And I had just came in, but I said something, because this Black trans woman said over and over again, stop touching me. Stop touching me. And, other people were like acting like they were flirting and it had been going back and forth. But I said, once she said, stop touching me, that should have been the end of that. There's nothing else to be said. It takes courage. It takes bravery. It's the same thing for cis men. Cis men do the same exact things. They have situations come up, and I know this because I'm surrounded by cis men. I'm surrounded by my family, my friends, and other men, cis and trans, tell me that they get in situations where they feel uncomfortable, but they don't know how to respond. And most of it is that they're afraid. And they don't want to say that they're afraid. But the reality is that we all, every person has to have the courage to say something when you see something wrong. There was no way that I could sit in that party. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. When I walked in and I heard what I heard and I saw what I was seeing, I'm looking around, I'm thinking, okay, ain't nobody else said nothing. I don't understand, and maybe me and him's about to fight. And we might have. I don't know. We might fight. Maybe he could beat me up. I don't know. You know what I mean? But I'm still going to say something. I'm still going to address it. And it is hard. It's hard to do sometimes. But, I just didn't grow up that way. I grew up believing that if I felt a way, I had to say something. And my life experience shows me that most people don't. Most people don't say anything. So if I don't say something, nobody's going to say nothing. And as soon as I said something, my wife said something. Then somebody else said something. And it was like, okay, it's not just me. I know my wife's going to say something, but I never want to put her in a position where she has to step up and say something before I do. That's not going to happen. And I mean, men have to check men, period. Men have to check each other. I personally, I have in the last few years since moving here have gotten more trans men friends. But the truth is, even in the conversation we had last night or yesterday on the road trip, I told them, I said, up until now, I really haven't had that many trans men friends because we'll become friends. And then I see that you're repeating the same toxic stuff that I've had from cis men my whole life. I grew up with a father who abuses alcohol. I grew up with a father who abused my mother, who abused me. And I have witnessed too many men be abusive and violent in my life. I'm done with it. I'm done with it. And trans men, again, we all owe it to ourselves to address the things that we've been indoctrinated with, the things that we've been told to do and to say. We owe it to ourselves to challenge those things. I have to challenge myself. You know, when I get upset with my wife, I have to challenge myself to not yell, to not go off, to not break things, to, you know, all the things that I was told that were acceptable as a child. I know they're not acceptable. They're just not. Like, I'm not going to call her outside of her name. It's never happened. It's not going to happen. You know, and if I do, I expect my trans brothers, my cis brothers, I expect them to check me. I do. And I would not want to be surrounded by people who are unwilling to check me. It's just, no, nobody should go. Nobody should go. Should just be that unrestricted. No, you got to have people who can check you in your life. You know, I don't know who said it, but accountability is a gift.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even like allyship is a constant thing that you do all the time. If you can't be so woke that you can't be checked, or you can't make a mistake. And so as an ally, I'm expecting, if you need to be held accountable, I'm expecting you to be open to that accountability. If you are holding privilege, or you holding power in a certain particular situation, then you are the person who has to be open to that kind of checking, open to that kind of accountability, and be called to the mat, and be called in, and be open to, oh, I made a mistake. And even if there's some nuances to that mistake, sometimes, you know, people's trauma is gonna have them hold you accountable, and it may not be as a comfortable fit as you would want, but it might still fit. And so
Right.
you have to be like, okay, you know, let me just sit back and listen and do what I need to do to if this happens again, to act accordingly. This month is Pride Month, and we know how important trans people have been in the narrative of Pride prior to erasure. Clearly what's happening in Pittsburgh. So
Yes.
This is Pride Month. And with LGBT kids being on attack, they are literally attacking legislatively when it comes to these bills and this crazy ass shit about trans kids. And with, you know, maybe new transitioners or early transitioners, or people who are scared and thinking about transition, we know that family support is one of the most important things, of course. Not necessarily blood family, but just a community of people that kind of support, having, and it doesn't need to be multiple people, but one person, having somebody that supports you while you're going through the human experience and a human experience in transition. We know how important that is, but we also know how important it is to see people who are living their authentic selves, and how you know, people who are living their authentic self can be beacons of light. So can you tell me who were before you transition, and even now, particularly before, and tell me what's going on now, who are some of people who were beacons of light, trans masculine representation that you saw coming out, that really gave you, may not necessarily be a blueprint, but gave you a light at the end of the tunnel, saying, ooh, I can be who I am because this person is being who they are. Can you tell me, you know, some of those people and why?
Honestly, I remember still the first time I saw another Black trans man. I was a senior in college, and there was a blurb about Kyler Brodus in the Advocate magazine. And when I saw that, my friend actually showed me and was like, "Look, there's a Black trans guy," and I Googled him. I started Googling him, everything about him. I wanted to know exactly who he was. I wanted to meet him. And
hey, Kyler. I love Kyler. Kyler listens to the show. Hey.
Yeah. I mean, it was a huge inspiration for me. I had never seen anybody like me. I had only met a few white trans guys at that point. And their experience was so different than mine. You know, it wasn't the same. So when I went to creating change for the first time, I met Kyler, and he introduced me to a room, and it was just a regular hotel room. And I opened the door, and it was nothing but Black trans men. And I was like, oh my God, I was so taken aback. I was like 22 years old, I think. And it just, it changed my life. It literally changed my life. I met my best friend there. We're still friends to this day, Celine Butler. And we just had, it gave me a community. It instantly gave me a community. I'm still friends with a lot of the guys that were in that room. That was almost 12 years ago. But those guys that were in that room, Salim and Enzi and Asher, there were, I think Ovid was there. There was just a number of people. Later, probably later on that year, I started seeing Courtney, Ryan Ziegler's work, and Courtney and I became friends.
Dr. Courtney Ryan Ziegler.
Yes. Dr. Courtney Ryan Ziegler. Got to say the doctor. He became a huge inspiration to me as well. And honestly, I think, if I'm recalling correctly, it was probably a series of conversations with him and a few other guys, because people were doing phone calls weekly and doing meetups online, and a lot of us were virtual before COVID, right? So a lot of the conversations that we were having, posting in groups and things, it just started to give me an idea of like, yeah, it's okay if I don't refer to my past self as a man or as a boy. It's okay for me to say these things. It's okay for me to want to have longer hair, because at that point I think I had shaved my head. I was bald for a number of years, but seeing a few guys that had longer hair, that just gave me like, okay, yeah, I do miss my hair and I do want it back. So I think there's probably some guys that are close to me now in the current time. There's a lot of young guys that are inspiring me. Rashad Xavier Brown, Dexter Davis. Those are two people that came to my mind immediately. But even elders like Charlie, like Van, there's just a number of people who I'm surrounded by. And since I've moved to Virginia, I just have a really good network of other Black trans men. And a lot of the work we're talking about, and that we're not just talking about, but doing, is about holding each other accountable, is about healing with each other. Even yesterday, that road trip to go see Charlie, that was our conversation. It was like, how do we hold ourselves accountable?
For me, I think it was right. We met at the event. There was an event that was a year before. That was a trans summit that Bishop Ross had put on, and they flew me in to facilitate some type of event with them. Something, I was facilitating something then at that event. Yes. But before, we had an event before that, and I was sitting in we were in the hotel room, and I was sitting in, this was like 2010. I was in, how like there's the ballrooms of a hotel room, and then there's hallways right outside of the ballroom. So I was standing there, and I was talking to a gay guy, and I was talking to another guy, and we were sitting there, and we were talking about dating. And one of them asked me, do I date trans men? And I was like, oh, no, I only date real men. Right. And so I was like, I'm sitting there, I just go on with the conversation, and the one guy was like, what do you mean by that? And I was like, oh, real men. I just ignorantly double it down, child. Not even knowing what's going on. Just dumb, my little self. And so he was like, so you don't think trans men are real men? Oh, you know what I mean. He was like, no, I don't know what you mean. What are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know what to say. He was like, so somebody who dates you wouldn't want them to invalidate your womanhood by saying that you're not a real woman, as if that's a real woman and you're not a real woman. And that doesn't make sense. He was like, and I don't know what happened, but it made so much motherfucking sense that I don't understand why it didn't make sense before. That was the illustrious, amazing, wise Lewis Mitchell. And so Lewis, that was the first time that I came in direct contact with a trans guy. No, because I literally didn't know that he was a trans guy. I thought that I was talking to two gay boys.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just checked me in the most loving, direct way. And it really
sounds like Lewis.
It really was a lesson on how I thought about trans guys and how I thought about transness in general, and how how kind of like erased they were in my mind, and I wasn't thinking about their perspective in regards to dating, in regards to anything like that. So my first trans person that I met that identified as trans was Lewis Mitchell. Years before this, when I was in high school, I met, at the time, they identified as a girl. Their name was Shauna, but they were a little bit more masculine of center. And so Shauna was a very super, super masculine lesbian at the time, but over the time of our year or two of knowing each other, so I had multiple cliques that I hung with. I hung out with a crew of lesbians and a crew of like butch queens and trans women, and they were separate. And so I had my own apartment, so a lot of the lesbians who lived with their parents would come over to my house to smoke because we all smoked. And so when I met Shauna, Shauna was so masculine and anti-me. Like, Shauna wouldn't want me to come over her house. Shauna would only want the lesbians to come over her house. Don't bring that trans person. And so it was real. She was really anti-me. But over like a 2-year span, a period of time, something started to shift in Shauna. She gained a little bit of weight, just a little bit. And she started to grow a beard. And so, and her voice started to shift down. Mm-hmm. And so, me being a trans woman, motherfucker, you not fooling me. Like, this ain't normal. And not to the, have I seen women with beards, a little spit? Absolutely. But what's happening with you isn't normal. Right. And so, she started at the time in the beginning, like I said, I met her as a she, and she identified as a she at the time. But then over a 2-year period, she started to correct us and say, "Yo, I want you to start calling me Sean. Yo, I want you to start calling me he. I don't want you to call me she no more. I don't want you to call me Shauna no more. I want you to call me Sean." And da da da. So we start calling him Sean, and in that moment, Sean started to treat me way better than they used to treat me. Yeah. And so I think, and at the time, because of the shittiness of how he was treating people who were trans prior to transition, there was a certain level of shame around identifying with transness. And so now that I'm older and I met him as an older person, they identify as a trans man, and they are very, very stealth. And so they are living their life as a stealth man with a wife and all that kind of stuff. But I saw him in recent time, probably maybe 5 years ago, and he apologized to me because he recognized that he used to treat me so shitty about being trans. But I think it was an internal thing where he was almost jealous of, and I'm not saying I think this is something he told me, that he was a little bit jealous of the freedom that I had to just say fuck it and transition as early as I did. And he didn't have that freedom at the time when he actually did, because he lived in his own apartment when he was a lesbian, and he had the freedom, but he didn't have the courage. And so he was kind of jealous of that and didn't know how to engage with it. So I'm seeing that kind of transition. And that is actually, and I like to acknowledge that is actually the first trans person. I just saw them going through the process. And that is actually the first trans masculine person that I actually met in my lifetime. So I like to acknowledge Sean and thank him for that experience because it, you know, it taught me a lot. Even though they were shitty, it taught me that, you know, sometimes people aren't ready, and sometimes when they get ready, they have the courage and the integrity to come and apologize when they do shitty shit. And
Yeah.
you know, so that was my first experience. So these were amazing beacons of light for me, and I want to thank you for sharing yours. And
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for being on the show. Can you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram, Black Trans Genius. I'm on Facebook, Michael David Battle. And Garden of Peace is also on Facebook, and we have a website, gardenandpeaceproject.org.
Do you have any projects coming up with Garden Peace?
So we have a couple things coming up. We just closed the Healing Artist Residency application, so we're going to be going through those applications.
Wait, hold on. Can Marcia's Play apply for this residency?
Yeah, so we have resident, absolutely. So I will definitely make sure that I share with you when we have things going on, and you can sign up on the website to subscribe. We don't send that much stuff out. We only send things out when there's applications or we have a retreat. So we have a healing artist residency. We also have a transformative artist residency, which to my knowledge is the only residency in the country that is designed for trans people specifically. And we do that in November during Trans Awareness Month. But coming up, we have a healing retreat for Black trans men and trans masculine folks at the end of June. And then we'll be doing a reading, which will be 5 Black trans men going through some healing workshops for 5 weeks together and then doing a reading.
Yes. Well, thank you, Michael. I really enjoyed this conversation. We have been kind of working on getting you on the show, and you know, it has worked out the way it worked out, and I love it. This has been amazing. And
yes.
Thank you so much for doing this for me.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited. I'm really grateful to have this space with you after such a long time. It's been such a long time. And just grateful to see your growth. For real. Seriously, you're doing great.
Thank you, darling. All right, y'all. Make sure you like this, share it, and you know, I will see y'all next week. Have a wonderful day.
All right, peace.
Hey brother, hey brother, hey sister, hey sister, hey sibling, how are you? Hey brother, hey sister, hey sister, hey sibling.